Okay, welcome to this evening's Cabinet meeting. Please note that this meeting may be filmed or recorded by the Council for live or subsequent broadcast via the Council's internet site or by anyone attending the meeting using any communication method. Although we ask members of the public recording, filming or reporting on the meeting not to include the public seating areas, members of the public attending the meeting should be aware that we cannot guarantee they will not be filmed or recorded by others attending the meeting. Members of the public participating in the meeting should be aware that they are likely to be filmed, recorded or reported on. By entering the meeting room using the public seating area, you're consenting to being filmed and to the possible use of those images and sound recordings. As chair of the meeting, I have discretion to terminate or suspend filming or recording if, in my opinion, continuation of the filming, recording or reporting would disrupt or prejudice the proceedings, infringe the rights of any individual, or may lead to a breach of a legal obligation by the Council. Full stop. Apologies. We have received apologies, Aisha, from
Councillor Ejiofor and Councillor Ayesi.
And for lateness from Councillor Goldberg, who told me he was at Manor House 3 minutes ago. He should be here in 6 minutes. Do we have any items of urgent business?
No items of urgent business, Chair.
Does anyone need to declare an interest? No, we haven't received any representations relating to item 5. Can I ask Cabinet to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 16th of January as a correct record? Item 7, we don't have any matters for consideration from overview and scrutiny. Turning to item 8, we don't have any deputations, petitions or public questions. So item 9, Councillor Arthur.
Thank you, Chair. So since the last time we spoke about the MTFS in December, obviously we've had the local government settlement. Headlines from that are essentially that the financial position of the Council has improved very slightly, but that we are still anticipating quite a significant challenge for 2018 to 19. You will have seen from the report that we are proposing to not only maintain a general fund reserve of 15 million, but also to create a budget resilience reserve of 7.2 million, which should give us some capacity to deal with the risk within the budget. You will have seen that about 34% of the savings proposals within the budget are RAG rated as red, so there's clearly significant risk built within it, but the budget resilience reserve should help. Other than that, I'd like to thank anyone who participated, everyone rather, who participated in the consultation. We had lower responses than we did last year, in large part because the proposals this year essentially build on last year's MTFS, but thank you to those who participated anyway.
Any questions at all from Cabinet members? No? Okay, well, I'll ask Cabinet to turn to paragraph 3 of the report. And can I ask Cabinet to agree the recommendations? Thank you very much. Item 10, fees and charges.
Yep, that's the quickest I've ever done the budget. This is, I guess, a standard report. Every year we have to review our fees and charges policy. This is largely saying that we will go in line with inflation for the majority of our fees and charges, but that a more comprehensive review will be undertaken in the next financial year.
Questions? Councillor Carter.
Chair, thank you. I do have a question on fees and charges. I did have several questions on MTFS, which seem to be gone through in record time.
You didn't indicate, Councillor Carter, and so I did look expressly in your direction. You hadn't indicated, so we moved on. But item 10, I'm very happy to take your questions on fees and charges. Okay.
The Council is raising the charges for pest control. Can I invite people present to turn to page 211. 211. The Council is raising the charges for pest control for all groups. However, the percentage increases for concessionary charges are generally 10 times larger than those for regular domestic or commercial clients. Why are these increases being so focused on the most vulnerable? And is this not a false economy? If elderly people forego or delay getting vermin removed and become ill as a result, will the costs to the health service not far exceed any revenue the council brings in by raising these charges? And if you go to page 211, which I have it on the left side, you can see there's a pest control in the left column. There's a mixture of concession and just regular charges, and there seems to be big increases for the concessionary ones. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Arthur, I'll get you to pick that up if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine. So if it's not at an inflationary level, it tends to be the case that we will look at the level of charges either for our statistical neighbours or the London average and aim to ape that. However, I will happily speak to officers for the specific charges that you've referred to and give you a rationale and a bit of context on those.
Okay, can I ask Cabinet to turn to the recommendations on page 163, section 3.1? Are those recommendations agreed? Thank you. Moving on then to item 11, admissions to schools, the determined admission arrangements for 2019-20. Councillor Weston.
Thank you, Chair. The report asks Cabinet to approve the proposed admissions arrangements for community and voluntary controlled schools for the school year 2019 to 2020. They're broadly the same, with one change that's worth highlighting. The new arrangements will include an additional oversubscription criterion for children of teaching staff who have been employed at the school for 2 years. This criterion has been added after consultation with schools' parents and school staff, and the consultation details are set out at Part 6 of the report and Appendix 8. The aim of the change is to support our schools who are facing increasing challenge in recruiting and retaining teachers. So with that, I'd ask Cabinet to agree the recommendations.
Thank you. Any questions at all? No. Can I ask Cabinet then to turn to page 278? And there are 6 bullet points at paragraph 3.1. Are they agreed? Thank you. Item 12 is the care leavers strategy and future offer. Councillor Weston.
Thank you, Chair. I'm really very happy to be introducing this paper this evening. I'm sure colleagues and others would have read the report, and you will have seen that it's a proactive response to what will be changes in our corporate parenting responsibilities through the Children and Social Work Act 2017. That's evident in our response through the proposed consultation on the local offer, but it goes beyond that, and it shows an ambition by the Council to develop a care leaver strategy which recognises that the whole system and the community needs to work together to support this group of young people, many of whom face significant challenges and vulnerabilities and who may need additional support as they transition to independent adult life. I'm especially proud that the work has been and will continue to be informed by the voice of care leavers. That's been through the design stage, and I'd express my particular thanks to Anna, who helped us with that, and to all the care leavers who agreed to be interviewed, which has been really important in setting out some of these priorities and principles. The paper, I hope and I believe, will lay the foundations for the development of an improved responsive care leaver offer which supports our young people in the right ways and at the right time. And again, I'd ask Cabinet to agree the recommendations.
Thank you for that introduction. Do I see any questions at all? I don't. So, again, we're being asked to approve the consultation with stakeholders, the draft strategy, and there are 2 further recommendations at paragraph 3.1. Can I ask Cabinet to consider all 3 recommendations and agree them? Thank you. Item 13 is the approval of the respite care policy. Councillor Vanier.
Thank you, Chair. I'm really pleased to present this to Cabinet. It's a joint documentation between us, the Council and the CCG, and it reflects a strategic working relationship between partners with regard to this policy, and I will ask Cabinet to agree the recommendations.
Councillor Carter, a question.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of questions on respite care policy. There was a very low response rate, and of those who did respond, it seems that only 1/3 understood the report. Was this an effective consultation, please? Yes. I asked, turn to page 398. Are carers who are caring for an adult being asked to pay for their own respite care?
Which paragraph are you referring to on page 398, Councillor Carter? It'll just make it easier for us to follow where you're up to. When you ask that question, what paragraph are you referring to? On page 398. Page 397, the final paragraph. Councillor Vanier or Charlotte, can I ask you to pick those up? Okay, it seems my mic is working. Thanks, Councillor Carter. Can I ask Cabinet to turn to page 380, section 3.1 to 3.4? Are these recommendations agreed? Thank you. Item 14 is the award of the contract for adults and children's statutory advocacy. Just to alert Cabinet and the meeting that there is exempt information relating to this report, and that will need to be considered in the private part of the meeting. So we'll consider the recommendations as set out at section 3.1 and 3.2, subject to considering the exempt information at item 23. Councillor Vanier, do you want to introduce the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. Again, Cabinet has been asked to approve the establishment of a contract in relation to the provision of statutory advocacy services for adults and for children for ourselves, Barnet and Enfield. These services support some of our most vulnerable people and children to be involved in decision making about their care and their support, and I ask Cabinet to agree.
Councillor Carter, question?
Thank you, Chair. Mic working. These are closely related questions. Why choose the provider with the lowest quality score? Surely this would have been the most important aspect of the service. And related, so why choose the provider with the lowest quality score? Second question, by the way, page 431, I think it's para 9.2.3, and the related question, if the bids are within budget and are expected to make between £37,000 and £100,000 savings across the three boroughs, why couldn't we provide with a greater score and quality, have one and we make less of a saving? Why couldn't a provision, I think there should be, with a higher score and quality have one and we make less of a saving?
As they relate to the procurement itself, Charlotte, can I ask you to pick those up, please?
Thank you, Councillor Carter. So in terms of the quality, we had quite a high threshold for quality for tenderers to get through to this part of the process. So anything on top was additional to a quite high quality threshold for the services. In terms of the savings, those are savings across all three areas. And we recognise this is a demand-led service, so actually having that capacity to put back into the service would be a positive benefit. So this is our funded element, but we would look to also use those savings to fund additional advocacy if we need it, because it is related to the demand in the system at the moment. We've used our profile of take-up over the last 3 years to determine what our demand is, but if we need to put additional resource in, that gives us some capacity to do that.
Okay, I don't see any further questions, so we'll return to this item at item 23 on the agenda. Item 15 is the Linden House development. Councillor Vanier.
Thank you, Chair. This is the proposal to offer an opportunity to develop a specialist supported living unit in the borough for some of the most vulnerable residents. The option in the report will allow us and our health partners to support residents with learning difficulties and autism to live within the community with a person-centred intervention delivered under the positive behaviour support framework. So I ask Cabinet to agree this.
Don't see any questions at all, so I am asking Cabinet then to turn to page 436 of the agenda and the recommendations set out on that page at paragraph 3. Are they agreed? Thank you. Item 16 is the authority to enter into a funding agreement to deliver the Station Square bus station project in Tottenham Hale. On this item, there's also exempt information, so we'll need to consider the recommendations at item 24 on the agenda. But Councillor Strickland, can I ask for your introduction, please?
Thank you very much, Leader. So members will be aware of the enormous work going on in Tottenham Hale, funded by the Mayor through the Housing Zone project, which we've been consulting on and have got an agreed plan for. Members will also have seen, hopefully, the new bus station, which has been there for some time. However, that bus station doesn't fit into the plans that we've got. There are issues around its location, its size, and it's really important that to maximise the number of affordable homes, that some changes are made to the footprint of that bus station. So, what this report sets out is those changes. It also sets out why that's important in unlocking additional land, providing additional housing, but also in bringing wider improvements to pavements, roads and junctions in the area will make what is still quite a complex road network better for cyclists and pedestrians and reduce congestion for buses. As a result, Transport for London are very supportive of this scheme, and significant work has been done with Transport for London and with our partner, Argent Related, on this. So this report sets out how that would work. It also sets out additional funds to be allocated of just over £7 million. But important to say that that £7 million is made up in part from unallocated spend from land value increases of that land through pre-funding of some Section 106 money and also through £2.5 million of our GLA Housing Zone grant, which is really important. So I think while it's about a bus station, it doesn't sound very exciting. It is exciting because it will unlock land and really let us motor on the affordable housing front.
So I'll take Councillor McNamara, then Councillor Brabazon, then Councillor Rice, then Councillor Carter. If you want to start, if you've got more than one question, Councillor McNamara, if you just ask them all, that would be great.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Strickland, as well. So just a few questions. Firstly, in terms of the integral ask within this for an additional £7.165 million, what due diligence has been undertaken to audit this stated figure and the funding gap to determine its soundness, considering it is, of course, so much higher than the original proposal? That's the first question. Have overview and scrutiny members been appraised of this capital funding proposal, and if so, what was their response? I would ask a question about the appropriateness of delegated authority without this coming back to, for example, a cabinet member signing. What with the scale of the figures involved? That's my third question. In terms of the £2 million cash flow provision of funding to deliver the station square before any sums are repaid through the various means such as Section 106 and the like. What assurances can we have that this would not be considered a loan? And also, how can the Council be assured, what with the legal guidance, with the question raised within that, that this is not at risk of breaching EU state aid rules? And my last question, just in relation to Councillor Strickland's points about the opportunity to improve, for example, pedestrian and cycle flows, trying to be glass half full on this, recognising the limitations of some of the original, I think, £42 million project for the conversion of the one-way system to the two-way system that we have had in place for a number of years on Monument Way and Hale. What assurances can we have, and what involvement will we have with other councillors, including on scrutiny with regards to the development of those cycle routes? Because unfortunately the reality at the moment is the cycle routes on those roads are almost devoid of cyclists, so we need to learn the lessons of that to make sure that if extra money is being put into that, that they actually will encourage cyclists to use them in the way that they're not using them at the moment.
Councillor Strickland, do you want to answer those questions?
So let me pick up a few of those, but quite a few are sort of finance or legal questions, which an officer might need to pick up. So in terms of the first questions on due diligence on costs, so it's probably better if Peter or a finance officer picks up the sort of process of due diligence that's been applied. But just to pick up the higher cost point that you mentioned, of course, what is important to say is that the cost has gone up because we want to do more, essentially, as you know from the paper. So we've been keen to reduce the footprint of the bus station in order to free up more land, both to get the clearer north-south route in, but also to get more housing units, which is really important. Now, essentially, what the paper sets out is that when officers have sat down with the transport engineers here, with the transport engineers at TfL, when you start reducing the bus station, punching an extra entrance in the north, you then have to start changing some of the pavements at the north so the buses can turn properly. You then need an extra junction. You then need some extra traffic lights. So it's grown into a bigger scheme in order to facilitate that. So it's important to say that, yes, the cost has gone up, but the cost has gone up because the amount of work has gone up. That's, I think, really important to say. In terms of scrutiny of this, Councillor Arthur advises me that this appeared in the budget papers. And then, Leader, I think questions on due diligence, on questions of loans and EU state aid guidance, I think are questions either for Bernie or for Peter.
Peter, if I can turn to you in the first instance.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So in relation to due diligence, Argent, who are the Council Strategic Development Partner for Tottenham Hale, went to the market with a scope of works, and it is from that exercise in terms of trying to secure best value that the most competitive tender coming back on that was in the region of the 7.165 million. It's important to say in terms of the delegations being sought for that this is a cap, and so this is in a sense also a risk transfer from the Council to Argent as our development partner, so they are obliged to deliver this infrastructure. This is a grant funding going into that scheme and is capped at that amount. In terms of the state aid point, probably Bernie's better placed to respond to this, but broadly speaking, this is in relation to open access infrastructure. So it's a funding agreement from us to the third party to deliver open access infrastructure, which is a state aid exemption.
Bernie, can you pick up the state aid question?
Yeah, on the state aid, I just agree with what Peter was saying. And in terms of the delegation point, it is appropriate because it's within the parameters set by Cabinet. So the delegated decision will be taken within the parameters set by Cabinet, should they decide tonight.
Councillor Brabazon, your questions? Pleased and surprised. Pleased and surprised.
Yes, I want to say I just want to congratulate some of the terminology in this report, but it does seem to conceal quite a lot of things, what I might say. My first question is, can you explain exactly why Argent can't fund this themselves? A very simple question. They're a very rich company. They're going to make a lot of money in Tottenham Hale. They own Pocket Homes, which is going to get all 100 of the Wellborn homes alone. So can you explain why we have to bail them out? That would be my first question. The second question is that the finance comments, not observation first and then a question. The finance comments, it seemed to me, set out quite significant risk to the council in this. And could you explain to me what the guarantee is going to be that Argent Related is going to reimburse the council? It seems to me quite speculative about the £2 million of Section 106. If the property market collapses or no one wants to buy these flats, then we may not get this Section 106. So I'd like to know about that. I'd just like to comment that I thought was a bit singling out that the health centre might be vulnerable because of this. I thought was perhaps why single out the health centre? Why not single out Pocket Homes as being vulnerable? Could I ask you if the Strategic Development Partnership has been amended to ensure, for example, given the fact that we're going to be loaning or giving as form of grant to Argent Related, could it be amended, for example, to provide more social homes as a reimbursement for this very significant investment of our money to plug the gap? And finally, paragraph, I think it's 1.2, the agreement with Argent Related, the Strategic Development Partnership, which I did ask to read but was told that I couldn't because it was commercially confidential, was signed not even a year ago, 11 months ago. So I don't understand how all this sudden extra £7 million cost for Tottenham Hale bus station, which was only done within the last, maybe a couple of years, 3 years, how this sudden cost has come to light between 10 months when it was signed and now. It just doesn't seem to hang together that people weren't aware of this work that needed to be done when this agreement was signed, so that now we are having to loan this enormous amount, grant this enormous amount of money from our capital funding, where it would seem, and as a question, is the council taking all the risk and are we likely to get any of the money back, really? Thank you.
Councillor Strickland.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you, Councillor Barrington, for your questions. Right, so in terms of question one, in terms of why Argent can't fund it themselves, and your suggestion the report conceals more than it reveals, I'm afraid to break it to you, but that answer is given directly on page 5 of the report in 6.2, and what it makes clear in that paragraph is that the council could leave, of course we could leave Argent to find that Argent Related to find that funding directly, but as it says here quite clearly, that obviously would impact on viability. And as it says here, the risk is then it leads to a disjointed scheme because it's hard to bring forward. It has an impact on retail space, commercial space, and potentially up to 950 homes not coming forward in addition to the health centre. So I think the report is fair in setting out that, because this money is all one package that's being moved around to help maximise community benefits, if you push up one bit of expenditure, obviously you can spend less elsewhere. And to pick up your last question, while we're on that one, I'm not sure it is the case that the health centre has been singled out. That paragraph and other paragraphs do list retail, commercial space, health centre, housing as many things that could potentially be impacted. It's also important to say that Argent don't own Pocket Homes. Pocket Homes is 50% owned by the Related Group. Argent also has a partnership with the Related Group. Now, in terms of, so we dealt with the health centre. Yes, but
sorry, Councillor Brabazon.
Argent do not own Pocket.
Councillor Strickland answer. He's doing a good job of it so far.
Thank you. The questions around the finance and reimbursement and risk about the finance, again, probably best Peter, if an officer talks about the due diligence work, obviously the report in the finance section does make clear that we do have step-in rights, so if things really go wrong that we can step in, but I'll let Peter talk about the financial work that he's been doing with colleagues. In terms of claims that why is there all this sudden extra cost that's suddenly come to light, I'm not sure that's quite what's happened. So I think that suggests that there's been lots of extra hidden cost which an officer has suddenly revealed and decided to bring to Cabinet. But I think what the report sets out quite clearly is the narrative of events. That obviously we've known for some time, as Councillor McNamara said quite rightly, that there have been issues with the bus station, there have been issues with the wider road works, because as Councillor McNamara knows from the work we did together, a lot of that was, TfL roads led by TfL, done by TfL contractors, over which we had very little direct control, and that has left us with some issues that we want to sort out in place-making terms. Peter and his team have been working very hard on the bus station. TfL did not build that bus station in the way that we would have liked originally, and that means, as the report I think does set out quite clearly, there's been work by our engineers, TfL engineers, and also, as Peter said, people from Argent, to go through this in some detail. So the reason this report is coming now, the reason that there are higher costs, is obviously because that work has been concluded. So I don't think we had a sense of those detailed costs until the work had been done. And then in terms of the final question around reimbursing for social homes, Peter will want to come into more detail, but I think it is really important to say that because this is one of the sites in the portfolio approach, one of the reasons that we've got this partnership with Argent and we've got the wider portfolio approach is so that, rather than doing viability site by site, where there are some sites that will be very profitable and make a profit, there are other sites where we really want a health centre or affordable housing, profit from the strong financial sites can be recycled around the housing zone into others. So it's important to say that sites in the SDP area are already contributing to community facilities and affordable housing. But Leader, if we get the Assistant Director to pick up some of the financial questions and the reimbursement questions.
Okay, so in terms of the risks, two obvious ones that are mentioned are in relation to what if Argent went bust while undertaking the works. The second is what if Argent goes bust at some point later in the day and we don't secure the resources that the report sets out we're anticipating receiving. In relation to the first one, the funding agreement will be the mechanism which controls that. That funding mechanism will allow for us to have step-in rights in the event that that fails, and we only pay in receipt of evidence spend. So our exposure would only ever be between small periods of time. In relation to the wider risk of Argent, say, going bust or any similar sort of event that would result in them being unable to finish the units and being able to finish the development, having invested in the infrastructure, the Council would then be left in ownership of sites that had already had the enabling infrastructure undertaken, and the Council would be in a position to dispose of those sites or to do with as it so chose at that point in time. And so what we would have is sites, in the case of the centre of Tottenham Hill, we'd have sites that we don't currently have today. This work also creates new sites at the heart of Tottenham Hill. In terms of the point about changing our emphasis in terms of social homes specifically, or more generally our approach to affordable housing, Councillor Strickland is correct that at Tottenham Hill we employ something that we refer to as a portfolio approach to sites. A key part of that portfolio approach to sites is taking significant resources from the Strategic Development Partnership with Argent and pumping those into the delivery of affordable homes with our registered provider partners in this part of the world. An example of that work, for example, is on Ashley Road, where through the receipts that we anticipate receiving from Argent Related, we have purchased provided grant funding to secure the delivery of 112 additional units through Notting Hill's work on Ashley Road South. If Argent were to secure planning permission for the current planning application, the Council stands to receive yet further resources that could be put into affordable housing.
Okay, Councillor Rice, do you have any questions? Excellent, thank you. Councillor Carter.
Thank you, Chair. I have a couple of questions. Firstly, I strongly suspect that the Station Square shelter will open on time and on budget and tomorrow morning. The only thing is this is in Utrecht, Station Square, in Holland. we can appreciate that the scope of a project might change and that this might affect the budget, but to shoot up 600% after a development agreement has been signed suggests a huge initial miscalculation. How could that happen? So, initial miscalculation, and if we wind up liable for millions of pounds of extra costs on a project that was only supposed to cost £1 million in the first place, what kind of cost overruns should we expect on a £2 billion deal like the HDV? Thank you.
Anyone would think you were writing a leaflet, Councillor Carter. Councillor Strickland, do you want to respond?
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to hear that municipal progress is finally being made in Utrecht. I'm also pleased that the Tottenham Hill Station Square, after years of lobbying TfL to build it, you'll see the bus shelter has been complete for some time, and the Station Square broadly has been complete for some time. As I said earlier, and we've said in public before in scrutiny, the way it was built at the time, obviously because I said it was not owned by us, TfL were heavily involved in it, is not exactly how we'd like it. It's not how we'd like it in the plan. So this recommends further refinements to that. I think I've already talked, Leader, about the narrative on how we got there, but in case you weren't reassured by that, Councillor Carter, I wonder whether the Assistant Director's got anything to add, and also if you could pick up, Peter, the question of overruns and contingencies for that. Could you also pick up, actually, because I realised I forgot one of Councillor McNamara's questions. Stuart asked around cyclists and how you'll make sure cyclists are involved.
Okay, so as I understand it, the question relates to how we could have got to a position that we got to where we thought it was going to cost about 1.3 million and ended up costing a lot more. The early work that we did in relation to that was based on a very initial assessment of what would we need in land terms to create the aspirations that we'd set out in our area action plan. And from that, we identified what changes would be needed to the bus station itself, just the bus station. Off the back of that, we, with Argent, engaged with Transport for London in relation to what would it take to make that change work. That involved a phenomenal amount of work with their bus teams, bus operations teams, bus infrastructure teams, network modelling teams, signalling teams, and a cast of thousands. As part of that, a series of measures were identified which were necessary to make that initial change possible. There's two figures in the report which show, broadly speaking, the change in scope of works. But just to give you some very sort of high-level examples of that, for example, there's the introduction of new signalling arrangements to get buses in and out of the bus station linked to changes to the junction with Ashley Road. There's 2 additional pedestrian crossings. One of those came up and was necessitated in no small part by the precise location of Ada College, which was not known at the time that we started. So to facilitate movement of students to the station and back again, that crossing was put in a particular location. An additional lane had to be added to facilitate buses turning out of the station so that they were able to get into the flow of traffic. So there was quite a significant change of the scope of works that were originally envisaged that had been identified predominantly for master planning and urban design reasons. And as we worked those through in transport terms, the cost grew quite substantially. In terms of cost overruns, I think in terms of how we're exposed to them, I think the key point is that we are providing a set sum of money to Argent and they are taking developer risk in relation to cost overruns on that particular component of it. In terms of the point from Councillor McNamara in relation to cyclists and pedestrians, a key part of the work that we've been doing at Tottenham Hale has to be to try and create a network of streets and spaces at Tottenham Hale that are for pedestrians and cyclists, and it is to try and civilise the environment, recognising that the 2 key roads passing through Tottenham Hale, they're strategic roads and it's very difficult to move them. So this basic idea of a key north-south link that's basically the continuation of Ashley Road is a really important part of that, and this set of interventions makes that possible.
Thank you very much. We'll return to this issue at item 24. Item 17, the Homes for Haringey Award of Contract for Multidisciplinary Construction-Related Consultants. There is exempt information at this item, which we're going to consider at item 25. Councillor Strickland, your introduction.
Thank you very much, Leader. So this report's very straightforward. In fact, Waltham Forest Council on our behalf have carried out a procurement process for basically contracted to help deliver Homes for Haringey's 5-year investment programme. An overdue procurement process has been run, and this reflects the outcome. of that process. And the recommendation is that Cabinet agree the appointment of Ridge and Partners to carry out a list of works which is set out on page, summarised at least on page 461. And this will allow us to undertake the broader works that we're now doing in our successor programme to decent homes.
Thank you. Don't see any questions, so can we move on to item 18, the STEM Commission update? Councillor Weston.
Thank you, Chair. As you'll see, this is a non-key decision, so it's for noting, and the report is intended to update Cabinet and the wider community on the excellent work that's gone on to date to implement the recommendations of the STEM Commission. Details of the work are provided throughout the report. I suppose it's worth emphasising that our approach in taking the initiative to develop and enhance STEM education in the borough reflects both our commitment to achieving an outstanding and continuously improvement education system in Haringey and our ambition for our children and young people who we want to be able and equipped to access jobs and careers in the growing STEM industries. Thank you.
Any questions at all on this item? No. Okay. So item 18 has got recommendations on page 473. Can I just check that Cabinet is happy to agree them, and it really is just to note progress? Yeah. Item 19, again for noting the minutes of key decisions taken in January. Item 20, significant and delegated actions, again for noting. Item 21, we don't have any new items of urgent business, so at this point